For joining me, Lysne. I'm excited to have you on the Her Collective podcast slash YouTube, and excited to learn a little bit more about you and helping women, period. Of course, I know you through getting the honor of being on the board of Helping Women, period, but excited to have you share a bit more about what you do and how you help the community and your work through that. So, why don't you give a little intro?
Well, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you. So my name is Lysne Tait. I'm the executive director of Helping Women, period, a nonprofit that provides free menstrual products to those experiencing homelessness and low income disparity across the state of Michigan. We've been around for 10 years and it's just, I don't know, it's what I do every day.
It's been great. You're doing great work. So start with an easy question then of can you share your story of how you started Helping Women, period, and kind of what motivated you to do that?
So Helping Women, period, is, I always call it an accidental nonprofit. We really didn't mean to start a nonprofit. My friend and I saw an article in Huffington Post in January 2015 about the lack of menstrual products for homeless women. And we thought, we have to do something about this. We had both thought that there was a government program that covered this, SNAP or WIC. I think women, infants, and children, they're going to cover pads and tampons. And when we found out that wasn't the case, we thought, well, we see people on the streets every day in our community, and so we need to figure out how to get them product. So we decided we'll have a breakfast. We'll invite 30 of our closest friends, maybe raise $400. We'll buy a couple cases off of Amazon and give it to the local shelter. And that was going to be it. We put it on Facebook on a Sunday. And on Tuesday, we had to change the venue because we had, instead of 30 people, we had 100 people interested in coming. And then on Thursday of that week, we filed nonprofit paperwork because we had people from all over the world who wanted to send us money and we wanted to be as transparent as possible. So that was, like really quick, bing, bang, boom. Um, we had our breakfast, we raised $4,000 and we thought, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with this? The shelter that we were planning on helping could only handle 2 cases because storage was very tight there. And then we were thinking, we don't want to give all this money to a company that's outside of Michigan. We want to keep it in our community. So we looked around and found a nonprofit or a janitorial supply company that provided pads and tampons and bathrooms in those machines. And it was right down the street. And we talked to him, and he had a daughter and he said, I can't imagine her being without what she needs when she needs it. So I will give it to you at cost as long as you buy 100 cases. And at that point, 100 cases cost $4,000. So we said, okay, here we go. Uh, we bought those 100 cases, and then we were like, what are we going to do? We don't know people. There's only so many people on the streets that you can see. And we didn't want to be another set of hands going, let us help you, because we put ourselves in their shoes and thought it's already embarrassing to be in a place where you can't take care of yourself. And then when you have people coming to you saying, do you need pads and tampons? You don't want to talk about your period either. So we thought, well, we'll work with organizations that already have that relationship and with those people. So we started reaching out to food banks and other nonprofits, domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters, and schools. And that first year we distributed about 150,000 pads and tampons, and we had partnered with 14 charity partners.
That's
Yeah, numbers, you can make numbers sound good no matter what.
No, it is awesome, and just starting that out of a friendship of just like, hey, let's maybe come together for this one time to do this one thing and then have it blossom into what it is now. And I think you mentioned it in your intro, but you're coming up on a 10-year anniversary of that breakfast, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be, I don't know. I can't believe we've been here doing this for 10 years on
The
one
time has
hand. And
flown
then on
by.
the other, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it's only
Uh,
been 10 years.
It's great. And so well, we kind of got the mission there, but as you've thought of that, how has the mission or your focus changed over that 10 years, if at all?
Oh, It has. A couple years ago, I'm trying to doing math in my head. In
What year is
I think it's
it?
2020, just at the end of the pandemic, we realized that giving pads and tampons is only solving a symptom. It's not solving the entire thing. And we sat down and had a talk and said, well, what can we do to change what the problem is? And the problem is people can't afford to buy pads and tampons. And we started thinking about WIC and SNAP and, like those things that we assumed had covered pads and tampons. And then just a senator reached out to me and said that she was going to do try and repeal the tampon tax. And we said, we are in. So we started like talking to senators and House of Representatives, trying to figure out like how else can we pull back this tax because it's patently unfair. And one of the nice things is during COVID, there was the CARES Act, which the biggest thing for us is the CARES Act said to the IRS that pads and tampons are a medical necessity. And the IRS had never classified them as such. And so then it was a really easy thing to take to the representatives in the Senate because Michigan tax law says that a medical necessity cannot be taxed. So we got the tampon tax repealed, and that was amazing. And then we started going, well, what else can we do? And we work with the Alliance for Period Supplies, which is related to the National Diaper Bank, and they have some great, they do a lot of great surveys and statistics. And they found that 1 in 4 students in Michigan miss school or work because they don't have the pads and tampons they need at home to go to school. And a lot of places are talking about, let's get pads and tampons in school. Well, we wanted to get them to those students who couldn't come to school, so they could take it home and then they'd have it there so that when they came to school, they could come to school. So figured out it would cost about $5 million to cover every at-risk student who has a period in Michigan. And I went to the Senate and I asked for that because I'm like, let's take care of everyone. And they came back and said, well, let's do $1 million in a pilot project. They said, choose 10 school districts actually, they chose the 10 school districts across Michigan so that we had a couple urban and suburban school districts. And we'll do $1 million for those 10 school districts. So I worked with the Department of Ed and we figured out the numbers and we asked the school districts, and then we were able to do 5 extra school districts because teaching them to buy in bulk and work together. So we did 15 school districts one year, and then we're doing 15 again this year. The first year, the school districts didn't get the money until February, so it took them a while to buy. So we didn't have good data, but we told me, I went back to the legislature last year and said, we don't have good data, but we will, and we need your help, and you need to do it another year. And for some reason, they said yes. So we
Well,
did
I'm
the
glad
second.
that they did. And it does
Yeah.
take time for those things to kind of show through. But I mean, hearing that statistic of 1 in 4 is crazy. You'd think it's crazy, but that alone should just show that, even people who might not be in a situation where they can't afford them, it is a medical need. You can't help sometimes when your period shows up and you're in a public place. So I think that's a great initiative to try to make that available.
Yeah. I would love to get more help in the UP. We don't do much in the UP because it's so far away. And I only have 3 employees. So
Yeah.
one of those is myself. But yeah, the UP has 16,000 square miles and they have 3 Walmart and 3 Meijer and, a handful of other little grocery stores, but it's very hard to get product up there. And, some people have to go to the convenience store, which is going to cost twice as much as, one of those department stores.
And
So.
then your options are limited too on, depending on what you need and you don't really have that much of a choice if you're going to the convenience store. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so
So,
I guess this is a little off topic of this question, but it sounds like you're getting more into advocacy and you talk about expanding to the UP. Do you go beyond Michigan and like how do you balance, trying to do it all, if you will, of like where do you draw the line? Because you do only
I'm
have
not a
three
very good,
employees.
I'm not a very good line drawer.
Okay.
Um, so another thing we do is education. We have the menstrual product petting zoo. And so my goal is to teach as many people about alternative products and period poverty. So I try and I'll talk to anyone who wants me to talk to them. So I talk to people all over the US about how you start something like we did and how you can talk to your legislators about doing your own kind of advocacy and education for those people in charge so that they can make policy that's helpful to everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how we go beyond. We can't give product to everyone, but we can teach them and we can help with other advocacy efforts. I was talking with North Carolina's Department of Public Instruction, which is their Department of Ed, a couple weeks ago about how we repealed the tampon tax and what kind of language you use when you talk to legislators and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
that's amazing. And I mean, the education portion is so important too, of, teaching others to do the same, to kind of spread beyond your community. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. You shared a few things that, kind of make me think of a success story, but are there any success stories that you've had in the last 10 years with helping women period that stand out of maybe it was that breakfast where you're like, wow, this is actually happening and we're going for it. But what are some of those moments that have stood out to you or success moments?
There's a couple. I think one that kind of shocked me is that after the first year we had distributed stuff when we were starting to work with the city of Lansing. Um, the person who ran the city of Lansing homeless department, I can't remember there's a lot of adjectives or letters, Um, I think it's called HRCS, but she came to us and said, do you know our budget for the city, the toilet paper budget went down after you've been here for a year because we've been getting out pads and tampons. And if you don't have pads and tampons, you're going to use paper towels or toilet paper. And especially in city owned public restrooms, you're going to take whatever you can to take care of yourself. So I thought that was pretty neat that we were helping. Like that was a very tangible way to see that we're helping.
Yeah.
There's another cute story. I don't know. We were working with some in a low income housing development. And there was a dad who had just gotten custody of his three girls who were all teenagers. Um, and he had no idea what he was doing. He was like, help me. He didn't even know the difference between a pad and a tampon. And so we were able to explain to him, you know, here are the products. And, you have three girls and they're going to be doing different things. They might want different kinds. They might want heavier ones and light ones. And so we sent him away with big packages. And he felt, he told us later that he just was so happy that he was able to talk to his girls about this because he hadn't had much contact with them before and be able to get them the things that they needed so that they felt safe and secure.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's importance to that education point of, or just what you're doing as a mission in general is also breaking down some of those taboos. I feel like, when we've had our first period or even the first few years, you're so embarrassed and you try to hide it. And of course, it's still a private thing to some degree, but also sharing that education. So, fathers and family members and just people of the community can be more aware and just, I guess, making that accessible and not something that should be shameful. So those are really great
exactly.
stories.
Well, I talked to women who are in their 80s and they remember bleeding through their clothes when they were in seventh grade and they blush when they're telling me this story. And I'm like, that's a story that's, 70 years old and you're still feeling the shame. And so I have a daughter and I want to make sure that she doesn't feel that shame, and So the earlier I can talk to people, the earlier kids can know more about this, um, the better.
Yeah.
Like really, I think elementary school is when we need to start, and we don't separate boys from girls. We just make it a nothing burger,
Yeah.
like this is just the way life is. And you need to know this because you're going to have women in your life, and you need to know this because you are going to be a woman someday. And so um, I think if you take away the mystery, then, teasing doesn't have as much of a hook because
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
Well, I think there was a time that we did work, I think it was you and I at like a women's expo, and you've shared this too in other stories of you'd be surprised of course the men are like, I'm never stopping at this table. It's with the menstrual petting zoo. But even women are like, oh no, like I don't know what this is, or they're kind of scared of menstrual discs or cups or things like that. So it is kind of
Mhm.
interesting to see that even women are kind of still nervous to admit to it or touch anything or talk about it.
Yeah, it was interesting when I went to talk to legislators. Um, the male legislators were, yes, let me take care of this. What can I help you with? What can I do? And I talked to two different women who had been former teachers. They were Democrats. I thought this is going to be an easy sell, and they pushed back. One said, I taught at Detroit schools. They didn't have toilet paper in the bathroom. So why should I? And I was like,
They should
that's a
vote.
completely different issue.
Yeah.
Like, and I want to get these products to home so that they can come to school, not, you know.
Yeah,
And then another one was just, well, I had to figure it out. When I went away to college, I had to realize there wasn't a magical cupboard underneath. And I'm like, yeah. And
but
it's
wouldn't that be
expensive.
nice if there was and you didn't have to worry about that?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
I, oh, go ahead.
we'll finish your thought.
Well, I was just going to say, like, I see this as a public health problem. It's not just a women's problem. It's not just, you know, I, I don't, well, I was a substitute or I was a teacher for a while, and I took the bloodborne pathogens training. And, like, I don't want somebody who didn't have the product they need sitting on the bus before I sit on the bus
Yeah,
or at a restaurant or wherever. And I think that we just need to make sure that people are taken care of so that we can all stay healthy.
definitely. And that was going to be kind of the next question of how does period poverty, well, segues into that of how does period poverty affect people just beyond access to hygiene products?
Mm-hmm. Well, like the 1 in 4 people who don't go to school. Um, and I think it's like related to Maslow. Maslow's hierarchy of needs says you need shelter and food, and then you can start thinking about more things that are higher level.
Yeah,
And if people don't have to worry about pads and tampons, and they can just buy food for their kids instead of choosing between the two, um, or if they know that they can go to work and come back home and they don't have to, like, it's just one thing off their backs that they don't have to worry about. And I think
yeah, quality of
it
life.
helps the whole economy, right? Like, I don't know. My favorite saying is by JFK, and he said, a rising tide lifts all ships." And I think that's what it is. If we can take those people who are the most vulnerable and lift them up a little bit, all of us will be better for
All
it.
of us rise. I do like
Yeah.
that quote. I hadn't heard that one before. So, running a nonprofit probably comes with many challenges, but are there any, that you want to share of things that Helping Women Period has kind of run into in, the early years or even now that I'm sure it's not easy.
It isn't. It isn't. I will say a lot of our stumbling blocks for Helping Women Period is that people forget that we're here. We have to remind the people that we donate to that it wasn't just a one-time donation, that we're here for the long haul. Um, and funding is always an issue. Um, yeah, I think that's the biggest. We've applied for grants all over, and I will tell you this one funny story. Um, there was a local garbage company that somebody from the garbage company reached out and said, "Hey, we have a foundation. You should apply to a grant there." And so we wrote the grant and we sent it. And the secretary wouldn't let it go to the board of that foundation, who are all men. And she called us back and she said, but you said tampons in it. Like she whispered it. And she's like, I'm not going to send that to these men. And I was like, oh my gosh, do you know how many are buried in your landfill over there? Like it,
How many you just picked up today on your garbage
right?
runs?
So, I mean, yeah, there's that
Yeah,
shame for and all different levels of people too. And so yeah,
yeah,
that's one
that's
of
a
the difficult
challenge of it
things.
too. Back to
Mhm.
the education part of,
Yeah,
the mission and what you're doing, why it's important, but also if anybody's listening to this, it's also important to donate, products or monetarily too, because that helps progress it forward. So,
correct. Yep, yep.
let's see. Well, I think we've talked about some of this around the education, but are there any misconceptions about period poverty that you wish more people understood? I guess for me, I think of the shame around periods. I think people, I guess, forget about that and forget that, we don't get to choose if we have a period or not. So I think, you can't blame somebody if they're in a situation going through that.
Right, right. I mean, you can't turn it off and say, oh, it doesn't work for me this month. I'm gonna just not have a period.
Oh, that might be.
Um, yeah. Um, and so a couple things. Kids are starting a lot earlier, 8, 9 years old. And the average age for people starting periods is like 10.47 age now. And when I started, it was 12 or 11 or 12. So, that's just 30, 40 years that it's gone down so much. Um, so I think that's, it's not just teenagers. I think also often when you talk about poverty, like when we talk about, you think about kids on the street or people on the street who live under bridges and all that other stuff. And especially in Michigan, we have so many rural areas and there's so much poverty there. And it's not, um, they can't get to places to buy food. There's not, no public transportation. And so I think that's another misconception is people think, oh, it's just for big cities. And the other thing is when you talk about period poverty, we've all heard stories about developing countries and how those girls can't get to school because they don't have the products they need. And, UNESCO came out with a report on Uganda in November. And that report said that 1 in 11 girls in Uganda miss school because they don't have the products they need. And here in Michigan, it's 1 in 4. And, in the whole United States, it's 2 in 5. So,
Yeah, those
um,
are crazy statistics, really. I feel like
yeah,
that's one of the misconception is you don't think of that and you think, it's America, everybody has access to that. I'm sure everybody has that, but that
yeah.
kind
And
of humbles you that that's not true.
even in affluent school districts, I was working with some students who are doing a project in um, Northville schools, and they did a survey, and they found out that it was 1 in 4 in their school as well. And they were like, "What?"
Doesn't everybody have that? But no.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I think that's it. And the stigma, people don't want to talk about it, um, and they get embarrassed. And
Yeah.
so I will say younger kids, high school and some college kids are not concerned at all about talking about it.
Yeah, I
And
definitely
so,
think that's something as the upcoming generations is we're a little bit more open to having those conversations, which I think is good and important.
yep, yep. And yeah, the kids are all right. They'll get us through.
We get better and better, right? Or we hope. How do you engage with the community and ensure resources reach those who need them most? So I guess you kind of talked to that about, through education. So, beyond, I guess, the local community, if you will, but are there other organizations that you partner with to try to, get the products out there and educate and advocate alongside?
Yeah, so we will work with anyone across Michigan. And really I haven't had to go out and find anyone to donate to. Like it's we have a long list, and so we try and spread it out evenly across the state, and like where our donations come from, we try and make sure that those areas are covered first, because
Yeah.
people in those areas want, that product. Um, but we have a van, and her name is Flo, and she's bright red, and you can see her. If you see her on the streets, you can take a video, send it to us, and say, I spotted Flo. And we've had her for almost 2 years, and we've put about 25,000 miles on her by
That's
just
awesome.
just delivering stuff all over. Um, yeah, and there are other groups like us around,
Mhm.
and so we try and support them as much as we can. There's a place called the Clean Love Project in Detroit, and there's like one in Battle Creek and a couple others across the state. So, that's
I think there's one locally in Kalamazoo called Care Collective as well, and they do a similar thing. So
yep,
it's good to see there's other organizations out there.
it is. And we're not trying to compete. Like, we all want the same thing. We want, like, our end result is we want people to be able to take care of themselves.
Yeah. And to your quote that you shared earlier, when we
Yep,
all rise, it's
yep,
better for everybody. So that goes
exactly.
along with that. Um, how can listeners support legislative efforts to improve access to period products? So you mentioned, work on the pilot project, but is there any other ways from the advocacy standpoint that people can get involved?
Oh, yes.
Right,
um,
where do we start?
yeah. Well, as always, if you follow our social media, Helping Women Period, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, when we have bills that we know of in the state that we need to have some support, we will post that and people can find out. Um, there's a great app called, or website called freethetampons.org, and they have a lot of language. So if you want to make sure that you can get free products in your work or in your school, you can go there and they do it step by step and explain how you can do those things. Um, yeah, so Helping Women Period, we have our website, helpingwomenperiod.org, and we have lots of ways you can help in there. There's a Get Involved tab.
Yeah, amazing.
So, yeah,
Um,
I mean,
yes, and get involved, for sure. So maybe we'll start to round out, but wanted to ask a few things about just yourself and your journey as a leader in this space. So what have you learned through leading Helping Women Period and working? I know you also have a book, so you can plug that as well and share a little bit about Instigator. But yeah, being an instigator, being a leader in this space, any feedback or advice on that experience?
yeah, it's taken me probably 8 or 9 of those 10 years that we've been in existence to realize that we were actually doing something. Um, and I see the numbers and I'm like, oh yeah, we're giving away a lot of product, but realizing that I was leading something is took me a while to get there. Um, I did write the book Instigator, Creating Change Without Being the Loudest Voice in the Room. And part of that, writing that, was to kind of figure out where I was and like how I got to where I was. I've started a lot of things. I started Helping Women Period. I have a 22,000 member Facebook group that's based in Lansing. Um, I started a school. And so helping people make little changes, and do things where your ego isn't involved. Like, I do Helping Women Period because it needs to be done, not because I'm looking for accolades, or not because, this is something that needs to be done. And I know there's a lot of people out there who say, oh, we need change. And it's very overwhelming to go look at all the change that needs to be made. It's so big. But if you can start working small and like talk to people around you that have the same kind of ideas, often what you think of as what would be the best change is only improved by talking to other people and working together. So, I mean, that's pretty much a lot of what I've learned. I've also learned that talking to legislators is not as scary as it sounds. They're just people.
That's good. That's a good thing if anybody's wanting to get involved to know it's not too scary. So do you feel like you've struggled with imposter syndrome, or at a certain point you've were able to step into that leadership role? Like, this isn't me, or were you like, no, I got this?
Um, a lot of getting rid of imposter syndrome is doing it anyway,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, that's, I think everyone that I know who's an executive director or works in a nonprofit is fought against that imposter syndrome. And I don't know if I finally became a certain age and I'm like, I don't care what anyone thinks, this is who I am. Um, or if it just took a while, but
It's kind of like building the habit of just
yeah,
continuing to show up. But I think
yeah,
that message, and the message I read your book and took away from it too, is it's so important to remember of just small change is still important change. And um, I like the fact that it's not being the loudest voice in the room. I feel like me being kind of an extroverted person feels like, what's the loudest thing I can do? Like, how do you shake up the world? But it's good to have that to a certain degree. But I think it just, in a time when you can get overwhelmed by there's so much that could be done and could be fixed, and political climates and, women's health, just where that stands. So I think it's important to kind of ground yourself in what's the small thing that can be done? What can I do in my community or with my friend group or whatever it might be? So I think that's a really good takeaway for anybody listening and wanting to do anything, whether it's with Helping Women Period or other initiatives, is just starting and sticking to it and starting small and just trusting in that.
yeah, it makes a difference. Every little bit makes a difference, I think.
And then maybe ending on, we talked through, you've done a lot of different things from writing a book to have doing Helping Women Period, which is a nonprofit. So any advice of ways that you stay motivated when you do face challenges, or, you've been on this 10-year journey. So any thoughts on that?
So right now it's very hard to find some motivation in the, you alluded to the world that we live in right now. My the thing that gets me is I really need to find joy in every day and find like beauty. I do a Facebook post about beauty in every day. And right now I'm doing this series of creating the world that I want to live in. And so I look for things that are pretty, like cut lemons or the sunlight on a tree or something like that. Um, and those are things that I have to focus on that during the day so I can do my post at night. But um, I think it really helps me remind myself that this is still a beautiful world. And even though there's people doing these huge things and I can't change those huge things, I can accept the joy that's in my world right now. And, I know that it fills up my bucket by going and helping people. So working a food bank or, just doing any little thing, like even giving your neighbor a flower or coffee or something like that
Yeah.
makes a huge difference.
It does. Yeah, that's important. And I think it's easy to get lost in the social media or media swirl of everything and forget those little joys in each day. So I think that's great advice. Just anything you want to end on? I know you shared some of the resources for Helping Women Period, but a message to anybody of like how to get involved or any needs that Helping Women Period has right now, just kind of a shout out to that.
Well, we're always in need of pads and tampons. And you can find a connect to us forum on our Facebook or on our website, helpingwomenperiod.org. You can email me at helpingwomenperiod@gmail.com. If you need any help or have any questions, we can provide one person's menstrual needs for an entire year for $40. So that's one thing. Sorry about that. um, we can, so
Yeah.
that's always helpful. Money is always the best way for us to buy product because we can buy product in bulk and get it to the people who need it. We also have people who make bags for us so that we can give product discreetly in high schools, and we accept IPSY bags. And then we have people who sew bags like 9 by 12
Mhm.
cloth bags, and they don't have to be anything fancy, but just big enough for 20 pads or 20 tampons. And that's another way you can help at home, really.
Amazing. And I'll
So
link some of those resources you shared as well
yeah.
in the show notes or the description, so that if anybody wants to go check it out, and you should, you're able to do that. So thank you so much, Lysne, for joining us. And I appreciate you sharing your background and more on helping women, period, and excited to see what you do in the next 10 years with it.
Thank you
I think
so
you
much.
said too, you mentioned one time that you want to legislate yourself out of a job. So maybe we'll
I
we'll
do.
circle back in 10 years and see.
Yes. Yes. Hopefully.
Well,
Thank
amazing. Thank you so much.